Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Halls of History podcast. Today, we are going over Norse mythology. This is the second part of the two-part series of the Northmen, or Norse. And my name is Colton Sorensen. This is my partner.
I'm Zachary Martin, and I say we get into this because we have a lot of stuff to cover and not a lot of time. So, where else to start besides the beginnings? So, in Norse mythology, in the beginning, there was nothing. There was a long, stretching void called Gungnigap. On one side of Gungnigap, there was Muspelheim. Muspelheim was the realm of fire and lava. And on the other side, Niflheim, the realm of the frigid cold, darkness and wind. One day, these two realms would flow out into the void, mixing, creating the first being, Ymir. Now, Ymir, he was the first giant. One day, while he was asleep, peacefully, from his armpit he birthed three gods, Odin, Vili, and Vi. From his toes, he birthed the first of the giants. Now, Ymir, he was no evil person. He was living his life the way any other person was. But Odin wanted to rule. But in order to rule, you need a kingdom. So Odin slew the giant Ymir. And from his body became the earth, his bones the trees, his blood the seas, his brains the sky, the skull the crust. So, yeah.
That's basically the beginning of how Norse mythology was created, I guess.
And that's the same for pretty much every mythology. There's a creation, an ending, and some stuff in between.
Yep.
It's all like a very good sandwich.
Yeah.
And I love sandwiches. So, okay.
Off topic.
Okay, yeah, very off topic. But you know what? Why not? Now let's get into the gods, the rulers of the land. So let's get into some of the more major gods. So first, we have Odin, the man upstairs. He is the god.
He is like the king of the gods, basically.
Yeah, he's the Zeus of Norse mythology, but just not as popular as Zeus.
Yeah.
But
pretty popular.
He's semi-popular.
Yeah.
So he is the god of war and wisdom. Thor, everyone knows Thor, but unlike modern media, how it depicts him, he actually wasn't this jacked, strong, blonde, perfect physique dude. He had a beer belly. He was huge. He had a beer belly. He was red-haired, and he was not the hero depicted as nowadays.
No.
He was a drunk murderer who committed mass genocide of the giants. He was the god of thunder, slaves, and farming. So, he's not the hero, but no one's the hero in Norse mythology.
No, yeah, nobody's really the hero. It's also a matter of perspective, because,
the giants weren't good.
Yeah.
But they also weren't evil. They were doing what they needed to survive, and by doing that, they challenged the role of the gods a little bit.
Yeah.
And they didn't like that, so Odin tasked Thor with killing the giants.
Yeah, and it's because they're higher up giants.
It's a hierarchy, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much so a hierarchy, which we'll get into later. So, now we have some of the minor gods. So that includes the lesser-known gods that are still important. So let's get into some of the minor gods. And these gods, they aren't necessarily minor, they're just lesser known.
Yeah.
Despite how important some of them may be.
And they're not, the most important. Like we said, Odin and Thor. Like, Thor plays kind of a big part. Odin plays a big part.
Well, I mean major. I just mean, the more well-known ones.
Yeah.
But these are going to be some of the lesser-known ones. Besides Loki. Loki, he's the god of trickery. He is actually pretty accurately described a trickster, and he was sometimes enemies, and he was sometimes an enemy of the gods, sometimes he was a friend. It's very confusing
It kind of, it's confusing, but also kind of depends, too, which way you're looking at and which, story you're looking at. Because sometimes in some stories, he's a good guy with the gods, and sometimes he's, working against the gods.
Yeah, sometimes he works actively is working with the gods to fight the giants, and sometimes he's fighting against the gods. It gets confusing, but that's part of mythology. You don't have to understand it all, because mythology is made because we don't understand it all.
Mythology is just a way of
explaining stuff we can't explain.
Yeah, it's like something people didn't know how
Zeus.
Yeah, Zeus.
They didn't understand lightning, so they made up myths and stories to explain it. And nowadays the stories don't mean anything and we don't believe in them. But that's not saying that we should forget them, because these were some of the major civilizations that laid the ground stones for what we walk upon today. Like Rome, our streets are the same standards that Rome would have been, besides the concrete and the pavement.
Yeah.
But the roads are designed after Roman roads.
And also what do we call it? Inside of battle tactics too.
Military.
We still use that.
Huge developments in military tactics were made in medieval times, and this is part of the reason why we make this podcast, is because we love medieval history and we want to share it with the world.
Yeah, and there's also back to the military part, guerrilla warfare. People use that all the time, and now we're even using even more guerrilla warfare to blend into our environment.
Yeah, I mean, everything we have is because of the people who came before us, our ancestors. It all starts with the Akkadians. And from there, it just blooms and blossoms into this beautiful world we have.
Okay.
So this went very off topic.
It went very off topic,
Let's circle back.
It's important to learn about this stuff, though.
So, minor gods. So we have Tyr, the god of bravery, justice. He's one of the more important minor gods, including Balder, the god of purity. He's probably should have included major gods, but it's too late now. He is probably one of the most important gods in all of Norse mythology.
He's right up there with Odin.
Well, not necessarily power-wise, but
important-wise.
Yes, extremely important, and we'll get into why later. Okay. Heimdall, the Watchman. He has a horn called Gjallarhorn, and when that horn plays, Ragnarok will begin. So he will blow that whenever he sees Ragnarok coming.
No.
So he has an extremely important job. He's not just some, willy-nilly, he's just some nobody. No, he has an extremely important job, and he's one of the he's part of the circle, the inner circle.
And he's not necessarily a god, he's more just up with the ranks.
He's a god.
He's a god, but what I'm trying to say is he's not where you describe the gods.
He's a god.
Well, yeah, but when somebody think of gods, they don't think of a guy that blows a horn. They would think of Odin.
He's a god. There's lesser gods than him.
I know, but they wouldn't.
And they're still considered god.
They wouldn't think of him as.
He's not the one that comes to mind, but he's still a god.
Yeah, he's still a god.
Because, like we said, God is a social status. He has that social status, so he is thus forth a god. Does he have powers? Yes, and he is a god. It's just he's a lesser known god.
Yeah,
but he's still extremely important, I believe.
Yes, there's multiple importance that are minor gods, but they're not as important.
So he's the god of war. He's not like most mythologies. There's multiple gods of different kinds of things. Like in Greek mythology, Ares, the god of war, Athena, the god of war.
Yeah, well,
they're both the gods of war, but one of them, they're different aspects.
Yeah, because Ares is
the god
full
of
rush,
violent, the bloody side of war, while Athena is more strategy, tactics.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about Heimdall for a little bit too much. So let's move on to Frigg, the god of love and marriage. There's Forseti, god of peace and balance. Bragi, god of poetry. Freya, god of love, beauty, fertility, and magic. Freyr, another god of fertility, sunshine, and peace. Vidar, god of vengeance, silence, and resilience. Uller, the god of winter. Hel, the goddess of death in the underworld. And unlike most gods of death, she was not... Well, that's actually a big misconception. misconception about gods of death. They're not actually evil people.
They like Hades. He's not evil. He was put as the god of the underworld.
I mean, they're just doing their job. Like, they're not bad just because they're doing their job.
Yeah.
And they're good people.
But they're just put with the wrong job.
No, it's not that. I don't think that they're put with the wrong job. It's modern stereotypes that are giving them a bad rap. Like Anubis. Anubis, he's not a bad god.
No, he was just the god of, like,
yeah, he balances the hearts, and that's his job, and he does his job. Yeah. Just because he kills people doesn't mean he's bad. Just because he takes them to the afterlife doesn't mean he's bad. He's just doing his job.
Yeah, you just do your job.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Hodor, the god of night and darkness. Njord, the god of sea and wind. Vali, the god of vengeance. Air, the goddess of medical skill. Sif, the goddess of grain and fertility. Idun, god of rejuvenation. Vili, the brother of Odin. And Vi, the other brother of Odin.
Yep.
So now let's get into some of the groups, like some of these species that inhabit the 9 realms of Norse mythology. So we got the Jotuns. They are extremely complex.
Yes.
There are so many different kinds of them. I'm going to go over the big 3. The fire, the mountain, and the frost. The frost giants live in Niflheim, I believe.
I think it's Niflheim.
Yep. Comment if I'm wrong. That's just off the top of my head. The mountain giants live in Jotunheim, and then the fire giants live in Muspelheim.
And we'll also get into the realms later, so we can also double check ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. And then there's the dwarves. They live in Nidavellir. And they are some of the best blacksmiths in any history.
And they're also they're actually keeping them, every single, most stories that you see, they're actually blacksmiths.
Yep. Like in modern media, they mess up a lot of stuff. The dwarves, they're perfectly described. Like in Dungeons and Dragons, per se. Mm-hmm. They're blacksmiths, they're warriors. It's perfectly described.
Dwarves are kept simple, while gods are trying to manipulate it to become even more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Which they don't need. All gods are interesting in their own unique way.
Yeah, but they just try and make them to make money, per se.
We have the elves. There's the light and the dark elves, which they are constantly at war with each other.
Seems about right. They're dark light,
Yeah, conflicting personalities. Draugr, the undead warriors of the realm. The Nornir, all-powerful beings that weave literal fate. They weave the life and the death of people. And not just humans or dwarves or any of them. Every single being, including the gods in themselves, is under the...
What?
Their death is controlled by this one being.
Yeah, and they're very important because they're weaving it. Because what happens if, they're weaving it and then it gets Ragnarok, It's kind of like they're controlling the fate, but it's also playing out its story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why, in modern media, you hear the warriors talking about fate. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, it's my fate, it's my destiny. That's because they have a literal being, and they have almost no free choice, technically. Like, theoretically, they have no free choice because everything they do is pre-planned for them. So that's why you hear them talking about, it's my destiny, it's my fate, because they think that there's literally a being weaving their fate, controlling their every move, breath, everything.
Yeah, it's like plot armor, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. Now let's get into some of the beings that are important to mythology. Goldenbursti, the god, he's a boar, and every day, he's butchered and cooked to feed the warriors of Valhalla, which we'll get into later, and every day he is reborn.
There's a continuous cycle of eating and being killed to feed them.
Skoll and Hati are giant wolves that chase the sun and the moon, and when they do, Ragnarok
when they catch them, Ragnarok will end.
They're a big part of Ragnarok.
Yes.
Hunin and Munin. Hunin and Munin, however you want to pronounce them.
It's a hard name to describe inside of mythology. They have, some of them have weird names.
So, Hunin and Munin, they're Odin's ravens. He uses them to keep a watchful eye over the realms.
Yeah.
Jormungandr, the road serpent, extremely important for mythology.
Yeah.
And he is wrapped around Midgard, also known as Earth, and he is constantly eating his own tail to stay alive, or else he'll fall off into the void.
Wasn't he like cursed or something?
Oh yeah, he was cursed with eternal growth. Same with his brother Fenrir.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
Into them.
and he represents the eternal cycle of life and death. He represents once one being dies, another is reborn. Hence him wrapping himself in a circle around the world. So yeah, that's cool. Nidhogg, he is constantly gnawing at the roots of Yggdrasil, dreaming about the day he will watch it die, so he will be able to escape. Because when the world was made, he was trapped under the roots of Yggdrasil.
And isn't he smaller than Fenrir, right?
Oh yeah, he's
smaller than Jormungandr.
Yeah, he's smaller, but he's still plenty powerful.
Yes.
So yeah, now let's get into some of the realms. We have Asgard, the realm of the Aesir, aka the higher up gods.
They're
like the more what you'd think about. So they're the Thors, Odin's, Tyrs, blah blah blah.
They're that social class at the top of that class.
There's Midgard, the realm of us humans, and Jormungandr. Vanaheim, this is the realm of the Vanir. So they are like your Freya. They hate the Aesir, and the Aesir gods hate them.
It's a love-hate relationship, I would say.
Yeah, they're constantly warring with each other, but they've made multiple treaties, and they don't often work out very well.
Yeah.
Jotunheim, the realm of the giants, the mountain giants. And then we have Alfheim, the realm of the elves. Nidavellir, the home of the dwarves. Niflheim, the realm of the wind and darkness, frigid cold, and the dishonored dead. Muspelheim, the realm of fire and lava, like we mentioned in the beginning.
Yep.
And Helheim, the realm of Hel and her daughter Loki. Hel, the daughter of Loki, and those who die of old age and sickness.
Kind of like basically hell.
Yep. Well, here's
all underworlds are the same.
So, hell in Norse mythology. Actually, let's get into this. I have some notes written down about that. The afterlife of Norse mythology. Where do they think they go? And yeah, based off of what they did. So Valhalla is a place in Norse mythology reserved for the most honorable and best warriors. Every warrior wanted his or her place in Valhalla. It is described as a giant hall roofed with shields and pillars of spear, chain armor covering the benches of the dining hall. Goldenbursty, the boar mentioned earlier, would be butchered and fed to the hungry warriors, the meat tender and the mead plentiful. The warriors would eat until they could no more and drink until they could barely stand. Then they would be transported to a large battlefield, armed with weapons, to fight until they died. Then they would awake and do it all again. But Valhalla was not the only place to go in death. The few warriors who wouldn't go to Valhalla would go to Freya's Hall, Folkvangr. You could die of old age or sickness and go to hell. And unlike most other religions, hell wasn't bad or punishment, but it was cold, damp, and dark. So not pleasant, but it was better than nothing. If you died at sea, so fishermen on a raid, but you died at sea, you would go to the Hall of Ran. If you were a liar, a traitor, or an oathbreaker, you would go to the Snake Hall. The Snake Hall is where Nidhogger would go to eat. And, yeah. And I believe there's another hall for the slaves and workers. Thor's Hall for the
because he's also the god of
god of slaves, god of agriculture.
So,
yeah.
Makes sense. So now let's get into some myths and some stories.
Some tales and, so in Norse mythology, Loki, the trickster god, like we mentioned, had 3 children with the giantess Angrboda. She bore 3 children, as listed. Jormungandr, this world serpent that we mentioned, cursed with eternal growth. A giant wolf named Fenrir, cursed with eternal growth as well. And Hel, goddess of death. For the first 2, destined to kill the gods. Jormungandr prophesies to kill Thor, and Fenrir prophesies to kill Odin. To prevent this, Odin cast Jormungandr to Midgard, where he would wrap himself around the earth to not fall off. Hel to Helheim, where she would rule the unhonorable dead, those who didn't die in battle. Then Fenrir. He wanted to make sure that Fenrir would never escape, because Odin was obsessed with eternal life and knowledge. So Odin asked Thor. Thor was a craftsman himself. He was no dwarf, but he could indeed craft. So he asked him to make an unbreakable chain. Thor set to work, building, crafting. And then he finally finished building the chain. This chain was extremely strong, that no man could break it. So they wanted to wrap it around Fenrir's neck. Fenrir broke out with ease. This discouraged Odin, but he still wouldn't give up. So again, he asked Thor. Thor set to work again, making an even bigger and stronger and thicker chain. This chain was so great, but it was still not enough for Fenrir. So they went to the two best blacksmiths in any mythology ever to forge a powerful chain to hold the wolf. The dwarves knew that they needed some ingredients. And these ingredients were no shopping, Walmart, find, dollar store.
It's not like, oh, I'm going to go and get some wheat.
These were impossible to find. These are but a few of the ingredients needed. A cat's footprint, the sinew of a bear, the beard of a woman, the root of a mountain, a bird's spit, and a fish's breath.
Yeah, the last one's probably going to be hard to get.
Mm-hmm. This strand of rope was called Gleipnir. It was about to be put on Fenrir, but he began to catch on. So he wanted one of the gods to put their arm in his mouth. So none of the gods wanted to, except for Tyr, the bravest of all gods. He stuck an arm in that wretched beast's mouth. Fenrir twisted and turned to break it out of the chain, but was unsuccessful. In spite, he ripped off Tyr's arm. All the other gods celebrated, except for Tyr.
They did not flinch.
Missing his arm.
He did not flinch.
At all.
That's a pretty brave god to put your mouth inside of a very, very big wolf.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Extremely large and powerful being. Thor loved his hammer, Mjolnir, which was forged by the one, the only Brocken Sindri. One day, however, he woke to find it gone. He was suspicious that the king of the giants, Themir, who was always in love with the goddess Freya, took his hammer. He sent Loki in bird form to fly to Jotunheim to make sure of his suspicions. Loki started a conversation with the king, where he confessed to burying the hammer deep underground, and the only way to retrieve it was if he'd be given Freya's hand in marriage. Loki flew back to tell Thor the news. They agreed and set up a plan. He would disguise Thor as Freya, make a fake wedding to retrieve the hammer. The day came, and Thor was perfectly disguised. They went through the ceremony, and when it was time to kiss the bride, Thor reluctantly did as they told, and the hammer was presented. Thor shifted out of his costume and grabbed the hammer. Themir was in dismay at the trickery at hand, and was about to attack, until he and his kin were dispatched by Thor. So that just shows you how ruthless the gods were.
Yes, and like we said, it was a dwarf, right? Dwarf that took his hammer.
Oh, giant.
Oh, a giant. Yeah, a giant took his hammer. And
they don't like the giants.
Yeah, they don't like the giants, but a giant wanted to marry Freya, a god.
Yeah,
which is
and Freya was already married, so.
Yeah, and it was buried underground.
Miles underground.
Miles underground. So it's kind of like, how are you going to get that hammer?
But, I mean, that's a lot of this Norse mythology, though, is that it was all trickery. Like, majority of Norse mythology could have been avoided if everyone just got along. But no. So,
It's always conflict.
let's go to the fall. Ragnarok. So Ragnarok did not just happen. There was a multitude of events that caused Ragnarok.
It led to Ragnarok, and then
The first being the death of Balder the Pure. He was the most righteous god. Everyone loved him, including Frigg, his mother. So she visited the Nornir to assure his eternal life. The Nornir said that he would indeed die, but did not say how. Frigg was heartbroken, so she went to talk to all matter on Earth, in the atmosphere, everywhere, to make an agreement that they would never kill Balder. And everyone said yes, except for the spiteful, bitter mistletoe. But Frigg thought the humble mistletoe could do nothing. It could never hurt Balder, even if it tried. So she returned home. Loki was jealous of Balder's newfound immortality, so he disguised himself as a maiden to ask Frigg about the ordeal. She told him about mistletoe, so he set to work, weaving a mistletoe spear. The gods, happy that Pure was now never going to die, celebrated, throwing spears, swords, axes, firing arrows, everything at the god. They all snapped, bounced off, did nothing. Except for Hodur. Hodur was Balder's brother. He was blind. So, Loki, the trickster, as his name suggests, gave Hodur the spear. Hodur thought nothing of this. He threw the spear, killing Balder in his tracks.
Oh wow, that became intense.
Yeah.
The pause and then the slow. Well,
I mean, it is an intense story.
Yeah, it's an intense story because that right there, pretty important.
Yeah, extremely important. So this kicked off the eternal winter, FYI, also known as Fimbulwinter. This was a 6-year-long winter.
That's once
that winter ended, Ragnarok would begin. The death of all beings. So, let's get into it. This is going to be written a little bit differently than you might be expecting. I wrote this as more of a story
than what
actual information. So, this is going to be more of like a third-person action type thing. So, let's dive into this because it's pretty lengthy.
Yep.
Before Ragnarok, the gods felt something bad coming. A horn rips through the air, for that Ragnarok has begun. The frost giants charge across the Bifrost. What would follow is a battle that would end the world. A thud tears across the air as Thor slams his hammer against Jormungandr, with a hit that would evaporate a normal man. Followed by another and another, barbaric war cries rip through the air, blocking out the clash of swords, steel, and wood. Jormungandr strikes at Thor, tearing his armor and flesh and sending him flying towards the beachhead. Thor got to his knees, coughing up blood. It wouldn't be long until this venom kicked in. He rose and returned to the air. They clashed and launched opposite ways. A tsunami of water arose, drowning countless warriors still fighting on land. Thor laid on the ground, staring into the sky, summoning whatever strength he had left to stand once more. He watched the oncoming battle, clenching his abdomen. He knew his time had come. He shambled a step, another, and soon another, until he collapsed, expelling his last breath. The first god who would fall in battle.
Very intense.
Yep.
And Jormungandr also died.
Yep. They killed each other.
Yeah, they traded kills. It's what people would say.
Yeah. Loki. was freed by his fellow giants and was now roaming Asgard, enjoying the chaos. Heimdall stood before him. "How could you do this?" Heimdall questioned. Loki maniacally laughed. Heimdall's fist clenched, a spear and shield. Loki with but a dagger. "So it shall be. Draw your weapon, or are you too much of a coward?" Loki charged at Heimdall, striking with a flurry of blows, gaining an early lead. But Heimdall shifted, dodging his blows. They continued the fight, and soon the battle shifted. Heimdall was on his knee, holding up the shield. Loki smiled as he raised his knife to deal the final blow. The dagger slammed down but missed. Loki seized the opportunity and pierced his spear into the god's stomach. Loki fell immediately, dead. Heimdall kneeled beside him. Heimdall kneeled down next to the corpse. "You did this to yourself." Heimdall looked onto the battle, ready to continue, until he felt a sharp pain in his neck.
"And so did you,"
Loki said. Finally dying once and for all, Heimdall fell back, quickly passing on. Odin stood in front of Fenrir, who had grown to unbelievable size. "The time has come," Odin said. Fenrir broke free of the rope. Before Odin could react, Fenrir had him in his jaws. Odin pried himself free. "Foul beast! I should have put you down when I had the chance!" Odin yelled. The duel that commenced was the greatest of all fought, both sustaining grievous wounds. But Fenrir finally got a grip on Odin's head. It clamped down, breaking his skull, ending the god.
Death to Odin,
Yeah.
as they predicted.
Tyr sat on the front line, leading the charge. One after another, the giants fell by the blade of Tyr. A large Jotun charged him, knocking him down. Tyr quickly scrambled to his feet. The giant swung, knocking the sword out of his hands, but Tyr circled around, wrestling the giant to the ground, landing a series of blows, dispatching him. Tyr stood, turning around, before getting shredded to bits by Garma, Hell's hound. As the battle ceased, the warriors lay lifeless. The sky turned to dark as Skuld and Hati finally win their battle, eating the sun and the moon. The world has consumed by Surt's fire. All except 2 mortals died from an eternal tsunami. The ashes of fire and life would spring, and just like a forest burned down, life will ensue with a new era ruled by Balder the Pure, an age of peace. This theory is how Jesus and Adam and Eve were born and made modern civilization. But that is but a theory.
It is a good theory, because in the end of Ragnarok, it was 2 beings and Balder.
In all mythology, it's similar, with a flood to surviving.
Yes.
But don't take that into account,
Yes.
because that's just a theory. But Ragnarok is, there's so many more gods, so many more battles, so much more that just happened there.
And this is already 34-minute podcast, so
Yeah.
I say we'll end it here for this part. Thank you for watching both of our episodes. If you haven't watched our first episode,
I would highly recommend it. I spent a lot of time on it, and
yes,
it's really good, I think.
and we spend time on these episodes, so please, if you like them, like and subscribe. Leave us comments of other ones that we should do.
So we're very open to suggestions. Like, if you have a dynasty or an empire or a kingdom that you would want to see us do, then feel free to drop a comment about it.
Yeah, and thank you for watching, and we will see you
next one. See you next one.
We'll see you on the next one. What are we thinking? Which one should we do?
Probably Greece right now.
Yeah, because I put up a poll, and you guys said we should do the Greek Empire. So we'll do mythology and the
Greek way of life, civilization.
So thank you for watching. And we'll see mythology and the
Greek way of life, civilization.
So thank you for watching. And we'll
see you in the next one.